It's 2 a.m. You're staring at the ceiling. 6 hours ago you said one sentence in a conversation, and now your brain has replayed it 40 times, each time finding a new way it could have gone wrong. You're not solving anything. You know you're not solving anything, and yet you can't stop. If that sounds familiar, stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will probably contradict almost everything you've been told about how to deal with it. Most advice tells you to calm down or think positive. That's not what this is. This is a method built by people who had far more to overthink about than you do, and who figured out, with brutal precision, exactly why your mind loops the way it does, and how to make it stop. It comes from the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who governed the most powerful empire on earth, while quietly writing himself notes on how to master his own mind. Epictetus, a man who spent part of his life in chains, and still became one of the sharpest thinkers history has ever produced. And Seneca, a statesman who faced the kind of catastrophe most of us will never know, and turned it into some of the clearest writing on human psychology ever put on paper. Here's the part that should bother you a little. Overthinking feels like it's protecting you. It feels like preparation, like responsibility, like the smart thing to do. It isn't. It's a habit dressed up as intelligence. And by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly where that disguise falls apart. If you're skeptical, good. Don't take my word for it. Test it against your own head. And if this changes something for you, share it with the person you know who's stuck in a loop right now, and subscribe so the next one finds you. Let's get into it. Overthinking isn't thinking too much. That's the trap. It disguises itself as effort. What it actually is a closed loop. The same scene, the same argument, the same imagined disaster, playing on repeat with no exit. It feels like you're doing something. You're not. You're rehearsing a past that's already over, or auditioning a future that hasn't happened and probably never will. Here's where almost everyone gets this wrong. They think the problem is the event, the friend who didn't text back, the comment in the meeting, the mistake from 3 years ago that still shows up at 2 a.m. But Epictetus said it flatly, almost 2,000 years before modern psychology arrived at the same conclusion. People are disturbed not by the things that happen to them, but by their judgments about those things. Sit with that for a second, because it's the entire foundation of everything ahead. The event is neutral. The friend not texting back is just a fact. They're mad at me is the story your mind wrote on top of it. Here's the part most people scroll past. None of that works as a theory. It only works because someone actually lived it. There's a reason Epictetus, of all people, is the one who figured this out. As the story goes, he spent years as a slave, and at one point his owner began twisting his leg, slowly, testing how far it would go. Epictetus is said to have told him, calmly, "If you keep doing that, you'll break it." And when it broke, he added, just as calmly, "I told you it would." His body was in chains, his mind never was. That's not a nice quote. That's a man demonstrating, at the worst possible moment, the exact separation between what happens to you and what you do with it. If he could hold that line there, you can hold it over a text message. Picture two people getting the exact same rejection email. Same words, same morning, same inbox. The first one reads it, feels the sting for about 90 seconds, and goes back to work. The sting is data, not a verdict. The second one reads it, and by lunch has decided they're not good enough for the industry, replays every project they've ever shipped looking for proof, and loses the entire afternoon to a story that started with one paragraph of email. Same event, two completely different afternoons. Not the email, the interpretation. Think about what the loop actually costs you while it's running. Sleep. Presence with the people sitting right in front of you, because half of you is somewhere else, replaying or rehearsing. The nerve to act, because the longer you spin on a decision, the more dangerous every option starts to look, even the safe ones. It's like sitting in a rowboat, pulling the oars with everything you have, and never noticing the boat is still tied to the dock. Motion without movement. That's the whole trick overthinking plays on you. And it's not happening in a vacuum. You are sitting inside a machine built to manufacture the feeling that you're behind. A feed, engineered to show you someone doing better, further along, more finished than you. That machine doesn't invent your overthinking out of nothing. It waters seeds that are already planted. Once you see that, you can stop treating overthinking as a character flaw and start treating it as what it actually is. An untrained mind, reacting to old wiring and outside noise as if both were emergencies. Untrained minds can be trained. That's the whole video. But wait, if it's just a story your mind is telling, why can't you just decide to stop telling it? Here's the uncomfortable part. Most of the material your mind loops on isn't fully conscious. It's built from old fears, old wounds, patterns laid down long before you had the vocabulary to question them. Overthinking rarely starts in adulthood. It starts early, in rooms where a young mind learned that mistakes were dangerous, or that approval had conditions attached to it. A kid who's corrected more than encouraged learns to scan for what might go wrong before they've even tried. Aristotle said we are what we repeatedly do, and that cuts both ways. Repeated anxiety isn't a mood. Practiced long enough, it becomes identity. Every failure gets absorbed the same way. You try something, it goes badly, and a voice says, "I knew this would happen." Next time, that voice speaks first, before you've even assessed the situation on its own terms. That's how a single setback becomes a prophecy that fulfills itself. Not because you were incapable, but because you started acting like someone who expected to fail. Plato's idea that our perception filters reality applies with almost eerie precision here. Change what the mind expects, and you start changing what it notices, what it remembers, and eventually, what it produces. Underneath most of this sits one thing: fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. All of it hijacks the analytical part of your brain and turns it into a threat detector running 24 hours a day. Left alone, it spirals into full catastrophizing, where the mind doesn't just consider a bad outcome, it commits to the worst version available. The Stoics had a specific weapon for this, and it's strange enough that it actually works. Premeditatio malorum, the deliberate premeditation of disaster. Instead of avoiding the feared outcome, you walk straight into it, in your head, in detail. You ask what you'd actually do if it happened. Say the fear is being fired. Don't just flinch away from the thought. Walk through it. You'd update the resume. You'd tell your closest friend before you told anyone else. You'd have a hard month, and then you'd have a plan. Suddenly the fear isn't a fog anymore. It's a checklist. And checklists don't keep you up at night the way fog does. The moment you've answered that question, the fear loses most of its grip, because vague dread cannot survive a plan. Now here's where it gets interesting. Many of these beliefs never asked your permission to exist. They were absorbed, from parents, from teachers, from culture, before you had any say in the matter. Left unexamined, they run the show quietly, in the background, without ever standing trial. The moment you name one, drag it into the light, and ask, is this actually true? It starts losing its grip. Uncomfortable work. Exactly the kind the Stoics treated as non-negotiable, the same way you'd treat brushing your teeth. None of this means you're broken. It means you're carrying default settings you never consciously chose. And that matters, because it tells you exactly where to intervene, not at the level of the individual thought, but at the level of the belief generating it. Your brain has convinced you that overthinking is preparation. It isn't. If overthinking actually prepared people for the future, the most anxious minds on earth would also be the most decisive. They're not. They're just the most exhausted. Everything covered so far explains the trap. None of it gets you out. That takes the next part. So how do you actually rewire it? This is where Marcus Aurelius becomes essential. And to understand why, you need the scene he was writing in. He wasn't in a quiet study with a cup of tea. He was on the northern frontier of the empire, in a military tent, while war dragged on and a plague, one so brutal it may have killed his own co-emperor, tore through his soldiers. His empire was bleeding, his health was failing, And in the middle of that, by candlelight, he wasn't drafting military strategy. He was writing himself a note, for no one else's eyes but his own. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. A man watching his world catch fire, reminding himself of the one thing fire couldn't touch. That sentence is the hinge everything else turns on. You don't control whether the project gets rejected, whether the relationship ends, whether the future holds difficulty. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, didn't control any of that either. What you control is the interpretation. That's it. That's the whole lever. And it's always been enough, because it was enough for a man losing an empire to plague. Renewing the mind starts with brutal self-honesty. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, which, translated into your 2 a.m. ceiling staring, means becoming an observer of your own thought patterns instead of an unquestioning passenger in them. Which thoughts are actually serving you? Which ones are sabotaging you before you've even started? This isn't about denying the emotion. It's about examining it closely enough to separate real signal from exaggerated noise. What you resist tends to persist and grow. What you examine honestly tends to lose its charge fast. Socrates said, the unexamined life isn't worth living. That principle scales all the way down to a single anxious thought at midnight. Examine it. Don't just endure it. Here's the practice. Each morning, before the day's noise arrives, decide what kind of mind you're bringing into it. Not a fantasy of a perfect day. A specific, honest intention. Today, I will notice when my thinking spirals, and I will pull it back to what's actually true and actually in my control. That's not a vague affirmation. That's a rehearsed skill. And skills get sharper with repetition, not with hoping. Your mind doesn't run in isolation, though. It's shaped constantly by what surrounds it. Seneca knew this better than almost anyone. Associate with people who are likely to improve you, he wrote. And he wasn't talking about people who tell you what you want to hear. He meant people whose honesty makes you sharper, not people whose company just feels comfortable. His own ending puts that philosophy to the test. Nero, the Emperor Seneca had once tutored as a boy, sent word that it was time for Seneca to take his own life. Soldiers stood in the doorway. His wife wanted to go with him. His friends were openly weeping in the room. And by the accounts that survive, Seneca spent that final hour not panicking and not begging. He stayed steady enough to keep dictating his last thoughts to a scribe, and spent much of his remaining time comforting the people who had come to comfort him. Not a man quoting philosophy, a man practicing it in the 1 hour it actually mattered most. If his composure held there, it can survive you unfollowing a few accounts. Aristotle split friendship into 3 kinds: friendships of usefulness, of pleasure, and of virtue. The first 2 dissolve the moment the usefulness or the fun runs out. The third, built on mutual respect for character, is rare, and it's the one that actually pulls you toward a steadier version of yourself. Take an honest look at your closest relationships. You'll usually find your overthinking gets louder around certain people and quieter around others. That's not a coincidence. That's data. Plato's cave is worth revisiting here. Prisoners spend their whole lives watching shadows on a wall, convinced the shadows are the entire truth, because they've never seen anything else. The one who gets free and steps outside has his sense of reality permanently altered. Your information diet works the same way. Feed it a constant stream of comparison and manufactured urgency, and your mind will treat that distortion as reality. Change the input, and the picture changes with it, sometimes faster than you'd expect. Everything so far has been about what happens inside your head. None of it means anything until it leaves your head. Which brings us to action, because understanding is only half the work, and the Stoics had almost no patience for a philosophy that stopped at insight. Epictetus put it plainly: first decide who you want to be, then do what that requires. Not think about it, do it. Overthinking lives in the gap between deciding and acting, and the fastest way to close that gap is movement. But wait, doesn't that contradict everything I just said about examining your thoughts first? Not quite. Examination tells you what's true. Action is how you prove it. Aristotle's doctrine of the mean makes this explicit. Virtue isn't a feeling, it's a habit built through repeated action. You don't become brave by feeling brave first. You become brave by doing the brave thing while the fear is still standing right next to you. You don't wait to feel confident before making the call or sending the message. You make the move while the doubt is still in the room, and the doubt gets smaller every time it's proven wrong. Plato made a related point. Real knowledge naturally produces right action. That truly knowing the good compels you to do it. If you've genuinely examined your anxious predictions and seen that most of them don't hold up, the next step isn't more analysis, it's proof through behavior. Every time you act despite the prediction, and the outcome doesn't match the disaster your mind promised, you're stacking evidence your overthinking can't easily argue with anymore. In practical terms, this looks unglamorous. One honest goal a day, however small. The conversation you've been avoiding. The message you've drafted 4 times and never sent. Picture that message sitting in your drafts right now. The doubt telling you to wait for a better moment. A clearer head. More confidence. There is no better moment coming. The version of you who sends it while the doubt is still loud is the only version who ever finds out the doubt was lying. 5 minutes of writing it down, not to spiral further, but to get the loop out of your skull and onto paper where you can finally see it clearly. None of it needs to be dramatic. The power is in the repetition, not the size. There's one more layer, and it's the one people skip. The language you actually use, out loud and in your own head. Epictetus advised, learn the meaning of what you say before you say it. Because words don't just describe reality, they help build it. Marcus Aurelius held his own private language to the same standard he held his actions, choosing honesty and restraint over exaggeration and self-pity, even when no one was reading over his shoulder. Here's the sentence that quietly runs your whole emotional state. The one you say to yourself without noticing. I always mess this up has no evidence behind it. It's pure exaggerated emotion, but your brain files it as fact simply because you've repeated it so many times. Compare it to, I made a mistake here and I can see exactly what to adjust. Same event. Completely different psychological outcome. The only thing that changed was the sentence. Plato showed through Socrates that careful questioning can dismantle assumptions that feel unshakable, right up until someone actually asks you to defend them. Turn that inward. Next time an anxious thought insists on something absolute, question it directly. Is that actually true? What's the evidence? What would you tell a friend who said this exact sentence to you? Most overthinking cannot survive that kind of direct interrogation. That's not a coincidence. That's the whole design flaw in the loop. Overthinking isn't a life sentence. It's a pattern, learned young and reinforced by repetition, which means it can be unlearned the same way it was built, through examination, through deliberate renewal, through the company you choose, through consistent action, through honest language. Somewhere tonight, someone is going to lie awake replaying the same conversation for the 100th time. Tomorrow morning, they'll face the same choice they face every day. Repeat the loop, or break it. Breaking it starts with one decision. To remember one sentence. From a Roman emperor who watched his empire burn from a war tent, surrounded by plague and betrayal, and still found the discipline to write it down anyway. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's not a slogan. That's the way out. If this gave you something to actually work with, share it with someone stuck in their own head right now, and subscribe so the next one finds you. Up next, we're going straight into how the Stoics faced adversity head-on, without flinching. I'll see you there.